They told you democracy would protect you. They were lying. Not because democracy failed, because you never had it. What you had was a theatrical production called trust. And in 2024, the curtain finally dropped. 44% of people across developed nations now have low or no trust in their national governments. Not disappointment, complete systemic rejection. In America, trust sits at 16%. In France, 4 governments collapsed in 12 months. In Georgia, 2 presidents claim legitimacy simultaneously. This is the sound of institutions shattering in real time. And if you think this is about politics, you have already missed the trap. This is about the architecture of control disguised as consent. By the end of this video, you will see the exact mechanism. You will know which stage you are living in. And you will understand why your next move determines whether you escape or become fuel for what comes next. Right now, somewhere in your country, a government official is making a decision that will shape your life. You were not consulted. You will not be informed until it is irreversible. And when you object, they will cite a mandate you never actually gave. This is not corruption. This is the design. Governments worldwide operate on a model where participation equals submission. Voting is not power. It is the ceremony that legitimizes your powerlessness. The proof is screaming. Trust in federal government in America stands at 16%. In France, 4 governments collapsed over budget disputes, each unable to pass basic spending bills. In Georgia, a president was inaugurated, while the previous president declared herself still legitimate, holding press conferences as if nothing had changed. Both claimed constitutional authority. The system offered no resolution because the system itself had fractured. In the United States, a shutdown lasted 42 days. Essential services degraded. Data went unreleased. Programs halted. And when it ended, nothing was resolved. Just delayed. These are symptoms of the same trap closing on different populations at different speeds. Every time you accept that a service requires more paperwork than 5 years ago, every time you wait 3 months for a response that used to take 3 weeks, every time a policy shifts and you hear nothing until it impacts you, your expectation of what government owes you shrinks, you recalibrate downward, you normalize dysfunction. This is the invisible tax, not on your income, on your belief that the system can function. And once that belief erodes past a threshold, the relationship changes. You stop asking for accountability. You start preparing for failure as default. This is the moment the pattern activates. A population that expects nothing cannot be disappointed. A population that cannot be disappointed cannot organize around broken promises. This is why trust levels matter more than approval ratings. Trust is structural. Your baseline assumption about whether the institution is even capable. And when trust collapses across an entire population simultaneously, you are not seeing political dissatisfaction. You are seeing systemic rejection. The social contract is being repudiated. And institutions know this. That is why their response is not reform, it is control. The trap you are in has 3 historical ancestors. Each refined the same mechanism. Extract compliance. Minimize transparency. Lock the population into dependency while pretending it is partnership. The first ancestor is feudal obligation. In medieval Europe, peasants owed labor and taxes to lords in exchange for protection. The contract was never written. It was implied by geography and enforced by threat of starvation. You could not leave the land. You could not choose your lord. Your entire existence was structured around an agreement you were born into. The mechanism was simple. Make exit impossible through legal prohibition. Make alternatives invisible. Tell people this is how societies function. The modern parallel is citizenship itself. You are born into a nation-state. You inherit its legal system, tax obligations, regulatory framework. You can theoretically renounce citizenship, but doing so requires permission from the state, fees, and acceptance by another state. You are functionally bound to the system you were born into. That is feudalism in modern dress. The second ancestor is company towns. Mining and manufacturing companies built entire towns around their operations. Workers lived in company housing, shopped at company stores, were paid in company scrip that could only be spent there. The agreement was employment. The reality was total economic captivity. If you complained, you lost your job, your home, your currency, and your social network in one motion. Leaving meant abandoning everything with no savings, no references, no support. The mechanism evolved. Make dependency total. Make the cost of refusal catastrophic. The modern parallel is employment-tied benefits. Healthcare tied to employment. Retirement savings through employer plans. Professional networks tied to employment history. You are a company town worker who can theoretically leave, but the cost is high enough that most never try. The third ancestor is post-war welfare expansion. After World War II, governments expanded social safety nets, healthcare, pensions, unemployment insurance. Citizens were told this was the social contract. Give us taxes and compliance, we ensure security. But once you depend on these systems, you cannot reject them when they degrade. If retirement depends on state pension, you cannot opt out when it becomes insolvent. The mechanism reached maturity. Make reliance systemic and mandatory. Make alternatives prohibitively expensive. Tell people this is freedom. Then degrade quality while maintaining cost. You are living inside this now. Every social program uses this mechanism. You cannot leave without losing what you paid. You cannot reform it. You cannot opt out. Now we map the stages. Stage 1 is the legitimacy foundation. Governments established through a promise, security, representation, public services. In the beginning, the promise is partially kept. Roads get built, schools open, courts function. You see tangible evidence. Trust is high. In 1958, 73% of Americans trusted the federal government to do the right thing most of the time. This was the peak. The baseline before the trap activates. Stage 2 is service degradation drift. Over decades, quality erodes. Wait times lengthen, infrastructure decays, bureaucracy multiplies, but costs stay the same or increase. Your obligations remain fixed while what you receive diminishes. Governments face complex policy environments. Too many obligations, too few resources. So they lower the bar, redefine success. Tell you the problem is you. The mechanism is blame shifting. This is gradual. Compare 1970 to 2020. What took days now takes months. You keep paying for 1970 quality but receiving 2020 reality. Stage 3 is expectation collapse. People stop expecting government to work well. They expect it to barely function. This is adaptation. When trust drops from 73% to 16% over 50 years, that is generations learning the system does not operate as advertised. Data from late 2023 shows only 39% report high trust. 44% report low or no trust. First-time distrust outpaces trust. This is the inflection point. Governments can compel compliance through law and force, but not belief. Without belief, every action requires more enforcement. The system becomes visibly coercive. People notice. They stop giving benefit of doubt. Minimize contact. Work around the system. Black markets expand. Informal networks replace formal services. Trust transfers from institutions to personal connections. The population prepares for collapse by building parallel structures. Stage 4 is where the system turns. The manufactured crisis cycle. Governments facing legitimacy collapse do not reform. They create urgency, point to external threats, economic instability, foreign adversaries, public health emergencies. They frame problems as requiring immediate centralized action, bypassing accountability. Consider 2020 to 2025. Pandemic response, emergency powers, then inflation, supply chain collapse, then geopolitical conflict, then unrest. Each crisis justifies more power concentration. Each emergency becomes the reason to delay reform. The mechanism is crisis as governance. Make the population too afraid or exhausted to demand accountability. Offer temporary stability for permanent compliance. This is observable. The World Bank and OECD describe these strategies openly. They call it building resilient governance. What they mean is maintaining control when legitimacy is low. Stage 5 is the fracture point, where the current moment lives. Trust has collapsed. Governments operate in survival mode, but the population is not unified. People splinter into competing factions. Each has a different diagnosis. Some blame the left, some the right, some corporate capture, some demographic change. The mechanism is division by design. When a population cannot agree on why the system is failing, They cannot organize. They fight each other instead. Look at the 2025 Edelman Trust Barometer. 61% globally report grievance. They believe government and business make their lives harder, but 40% of those with high grievance approve of hostile activism, attacking people online, spreading disinformation, threatening violence, damaging property. The anger is real. The diagnosis is fractured. The response is self-destructive. This is engineered instability. Keep the population angry, but too divided to coordinate. Stage 6 is authoritarian consolidation. When trust collapses and populations fracture, institutions do not democratize. They harden. Leaders who promise order gain support even with undemocratic methods, offer certainty for compliance, promise to cut through dysfunction even if that means cutting through rights. Data from 2024 shows 45 countries in autocratization episodes. Democratic backsliding, opposition suppressed, media attacked, judicial oversight dismantled. Countries that were democracies a decade ago, Georgia, Hungary, India, each followed the pattern: legitimacy crisis, elite consolidation, emergency powers, permanent alterations. The population voted for someone who promised to make things work. By the time they realized the cost, exit was no longer an option. Here is where you are. You are living in stage 5, approaching stage 6. The fracture point. Trust is gone. Division is accelerating. Authoritarian solutions are normalized. How many times have you heard we just need a strong leader? How many policies implemented without debate? The pattern does not care about your political system. It cares about conditions: low trust, high grievance, fragmented opposition, elite incentive to consolidate. These exist across democracies now. The trap is closing. Now the mechanism plainly. Modern governance is optimized for institutional survival, not citizen welfare. When trust is high, these align. But when trust collapses, goals diverge. Instead of reform, they double down. Increase surveillance. Expand legal frameworks to criminalize opposition. Control information flow. The OECD's 2024 report discusses how governments must manage perception in low trust environments. They call it strategic communication. What they mean is propaganda. The solution is not giving citizens more say. It is creating the perception of inclusion without power transfer. Town halls where decisions are already made. Public comment periods where feedback is ignored. The mechanism is procedural theater. You pay taxes funding agencies with mandates, but you have no accountability mechanism except voting for representatives who also lack oversight. When agencies fail, no one is fired. When programs waste billions, they get more funding. You are told the system is complex. Experts are handling it. This is the company town mechanism. You cannot leave. Exit is prohibitively costly. That is how the trap holds. The survival payoff. 3 rules. First, never trust institutional narrative at face value. When they say something is necessary, ask who benefits. When they say there is no alternative, find alternatives. When they say trust the process, examine whether it delivers results or delays. Second, build parallel structures. You cannot change the system from inside. Reduce dependency. Learn skills without institutional permission. Build networks outside official channels. Communities survive when institutions fail. Build before crisis. Third, do not take the division bait. The system wants you angry at your neighbor, blaming the other tribe. The structure is the problem, not the personnel. Changing leaders does not change incentives. Fight lateral battles and you never look up at the mechanism above.